Greetings and salutations. This is an unboxing of Gale Force 9's tanks, the World War II tank skirmish game. It is in fact a complete tank game on the inside. It is a starter set with the Panther versus the Sherman. They do offer expansions of different tanks. And then on the back it goes into a little bit more detail and shows you the pictures of what some of the cards look like, what the models of the tanks look like on the inside. So let's open up and see what we have here. So it says 2 players. Lasting about 30 minutes. I think that really depends on the kind of game that you have, but here we go. Cardboard box is, well, fairly sturdy. Now in here you have some sprues of tanks. You've got some cards. So let's take those apart and see what we have here. Box off to the side, and let's see what we start out with. Okay, well, first off, the game is complete. The only thing you would need is some modeling glue, some model cutters, sprue cutters, and hopefully a little bit of modeling experience, and you would be able to go and take apart the model sprues here and be able to construct a Sherman. Now what's really nice about this is 15mm scale, but you also have two Shermans, 2 types of Shermans that you can have with this sprue set. The turret on this side here would allow you to have the 75mm Sherman, which essentially was like the original Sherman, if you will, with a 75mm gun. But by the time the Allies got to Normandy, there were screams about we need a bigger gun to take on the German tanks. So this is the turret that would house the 76mm gun. Again, if you look on the back here, the parts are finely detailed. You do have the machine guns. So you have 2 separate 50 caliber machine guns you can mount on both turrets. You also have a little bit of extra stuff here, some stowage. You have some tank tracks here as well. In terms of the guns themselves, you can choose between which particular 76mm gun do you want. Do you want it with the muzzle brake or not the muzzle brake? Again, that's entirely up to you. You have the option of mounting your turrets with magnets, or they offer you a peg that you can glue into the bottom of the turret and it will go into the hole on the hull itself. But anyways, that's not too bad here. So you get 2 of those. And again, notice the color. It's a dark olive, typical American color. You have no problem here. On here, this is the German sprue. For this, this is the German Panther tank that you are getting. You may notice that you have 2 different kinds of holes here. Unlike the American Sherman, where you can swap out turrets, the Germans here, you have the choice of the Jagd Panther, which is the hunting Panther. It sports a larger gun, an 88mm gun, compared to the 75mm gun for the regular turreted Panther. You cannot switch out the hulls. You have to choose one or the other. It's kind of an interesting note. Again, you've got some track here and there that you can add onto the parts of the tank to act as extra armor, which is what the tank crews on both sides of World War II typically did. Extra armor meaning extra protection. And again, the color, it's very distinct. I actually thought it would be a little bit more yellow as opposed to this kind of a greenish color, but maybe it's reflecting the late war. All right, the Rulebook. Colorful, again, professionally designed as expected. You have a mix of actual pictures on here. It's kind of nice here when they say the ubiquitous American Sherman. Those are Sherman tanks, that is true, but those are Free French troops on there. I spotted that on the side of the Sherman hull there, but nonetheless, that is an M4A2 Sherman, which is the one that they lend-leased typically to the other allies during the war. The real Panther, if you will, maybe give some inspiration. And then it starts talking about tank heroes of World War II. Again, you look at the basics, the Panzer IV, the Panther, the Sherman Firefly, and the Comet for the British. The Sherman 76mm for the American, and the Pershing, which is really, really late war. We're talking early 45 at that point. On the Russian front, you also have the T-34-85, the Su-100. Believe me when I say that there's more selections than this, but this section is talking about individual tank heroes with their stories. Now, this is real-life people. They existed at one point in history, and this is the deeds that they did. Then it talks about the turn sequence, basically 3 phases: movement, shooting, and command. Pretty straightforward. The tank cards with all the necessary information. If you are familiar with the Star Wars miniatures game X-Wing, there are some similarities to it. Some people have referred to it as X-Wing with tanks. I guess so. I'll go with it. But it includes information like the picture of the tank name, the point value, the nationality, and then it gives you your initiative, what order you move in, what order you shoot in, the attack dice you roll, the defense dice that you roll, which can also is modified, and then of course, how many hits can you take before your tank is knocked out. Over here you have the crew and upgrade cards. They are a little bit smaller than the tank cards here. This differs with the crew. It could be, for example, a driver is good at getting the speed out of the tank more than others. Then you have critical cards, critical damage, which will tell you if it is repairable or not. But once you get the damage stays. It doesn't matter if you repair it or not. So there's a possibility of the Shermans doing things to Panthers like doing damage to the engine, for example. Here, speed tokens, damage or destroyed tokens, objective tokens, and then of course tank identification tokens, which these are based on real-life tank units. It's not something that is made up, kind of like a science fiction game. This is the measuring arrow, which is basically what the tanks use to move around to measure the angle and all that. Going through, it's talking about the game setup. How do you deploy your troops within one arrow from the edge of the board? Movement, the diagram shows you how you can position your tank using the movement arrow. Every time if you move, you can move up to 2. Some tanks can move up to 3, but movement does play a role in terms of defensive fire when you're rolling to defend. Okay. Then, of course, there is rapid movement also. Again, it depends on what you want. It also talks a little bit about the terrain. In this case, pretty much it's forests and trees, or woods, trees, buildings, things like that, how they block line of sight. And it goes into, what's impassable terrain here. This talks about the line of sight, what can you see, what can't you see, because when a tank does get knocked out, it does create line of sight blockage. Okay, and all through they put in their pictures of the various tanks. So as you can see, I think this is clearly aimed for beginning players, because you're seeing lots and lots of diagrams on how to. Okay, the firing arc, for example, of tanks that have just the forward-facing gun. They don't have the turret. Number of attack dice, the number of defense dice, and it shows you how to do that. It also talks more about the defender dice. It talks about cover, what is considered a side shot, for example, in here. okay, the command phase, and then the keyword reference. There's some things there based on nationality, their nationality traits. And it also talks about building up your platoon, that you go with 100 points, with individual tanks, and with crew upgrade cards, or maybe equipment upgrade cards. That gives you an edge. We'll look at that a little bit later. So going through, then it talks about the missions that you have here. So this is just several missions that the skirmish game does have for you guys. Essentially, they leave it up to your imagination as far as how to place the terrain. They do give you guidelines on how to place the terrain. And then, of course, it talks about the assembly of the individual tanks themselves, what pieces go where. And then, of course, they talk about painting. If you don't care about painting, you can keep the basic colors, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But for those of us who have played with 15mm miniatures, there are those of us, we love to paint these guys because it makes them come alive more on the battlefield, if you will. It also includes something about the first game, which is based on an actual historical fight in July of '44 in Normandy. There was the lone German tank there. Well, he actually had support in real life, but Ernest Barkman, and how he delayed the American armored advance, and it gives you a setup here of the map. So you're using all the terrain, all the tanks from this very box. You wouldn't need everything else. You wouldn't need anything else outside this box unless you have a bed sheet, a green bed sheet for the terrain and all that. And then, of course, this is your quick reference. It's pretty easy and clear to understand what phases you have. It gives you the page number of the rulebook as well. It also talks about the tokens. What do the tokens mean? And all that. All in all, that's pretty comprehensive. Now, what other goodies do we have? Well, here is a stack of cards, which, opening it up, you gotta be impressed with the shrink wrap. There we go. Okay. So for the cards themselves, we have a mixture of... Alright. So, we have tank cards here. And what's kind of nice is that you get a very basic set of tank cards. So it's not just the German Panther and the 2 Shermans included in this set. It also gets into some British tanks, Russian tanks, as you can see here. So it really covers the basic tanks that you would find in about 1944-45 in the European theater of conflict. Okay, so that's really cool. These now are crew upgrades, things like that. So it just gives you individual characteristics. It shows you the nationality. It shows you what crew member has the upgrade, and then it explains what it is, and it also gives you, the name of an actual person who was actually good at what they did, which is really cool because, again, you're learning history in a fun and entertaining way. And then here you got some generic cards. You can see with the world, with the globe there, that means any nationality can use it, whereas when you see a nationality like this, only that nationality can use it, like the Americans. On here, I'm not going to go and open it right now, but this is dealing with critical damage. There are times in the rules when you roll and you are so successful, you've done some critical damage to the tank, and the tank that got hit, the owning player has to pick a card from the critical damage pile. So you can see here what it will tell you, and it also indicates the damage that you have. Now, sometimes the damage is just immediate and that's it. Other times it's damage that you have to sit down and repair it. So it gives, certain things can happen to the tanks. So it's kind of cool because I think about the Sherman and how, it can hurt the Panther. It can cause engine damage to the Panther, which happened in real life with Ernest Barkman. He did end up winning the engagement, but his tank had to limp off to safety. Had to go limp back to the lines here to get his tank fixed. Okay, the other things. So what's kind of cool here, it includes cardboard terrain, and right here, these are buildings. Okay, it is a top view down, and then here, these are the damage markers that the tanks will have. You have objective markers, and then of course, these are your speed indicators that you have. Let me go ahead and open this up because there is certainly more in this stack. Again, then they wrap this up. They wrap it up good and tight. Oops. All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's see if I can put that thing back in here. Okay, so that takes care of the first part, and again, you can flip it on the back. You got other information on there. Okay, now for other terrain. So this is a woods terrain, and again, some more damage markers. You can flip it on the back here, and it's just another view, so it doesn't matter which side that you flip on, you absolutely have it. So again, it's complete terrain on here. Okay, wow, it's not, apparently you don't have the difficulty popping out the terrain, putting it on the board, and off you go. Ready to play. Now, in terms of other things that you have on here, you do have the measuring arrows. That's pretty critical, one for each player that you see on here. But what is really cool is, if you have more than one tank of the same type, how do you keep track of them on the battlefield? Well, you do have these ID tokens that can be used. You have the American tokens, and again, I want to point out that these symbols, these designs, these words, that was actually on the real tank. So you are seeing, again, a bit of history on there. Okay, and you see it here for the Soviets as well. You see it for the Germans. It represented different panzer divisions, like this on here. These two and these two, they represent different Tiger battalions, Tiger tank battalions. This here for the British, that's the Desert Rats. Okay, and for this here, these two here with a cat biting down on the track, that is the American tank destroyer symbol. So, all in all, this is not a bad set. I think it's worth it if you want to explore a little bit of history. The rules aren't that complicated. And, hey, I might actually get a couple of students to try this out. Who knows? Hey, hope this benefited you. And goodbye, and God bless you. Have a great day.